The stars had long whispered of humanity's end. After the last exodus, the great empires of the galaxy buried their memory under layers of history, hoping the scars of old wars would fade with time. Humanity had been a wildfire, brilliant, unpredictable, and feared. When they vanished, the galaxy celebrated. Peace treaties were signed. New alliances blossomed. The ancient halls of the Galactic Accord echoed with pride. The nightmare was over, they believed. They were wrong. On the cold edge of civilized space, sensors began to fail. Communications blacked out across outer colonies. Patrol ships sent distress signals filled with static and terror before going silent. Merchants and travelers spoke of a black ship, massive enough to cast shadows over entire planets, moving through the void like a predator stalking wounded prey. Most dismissed the rumors as space madness or pirate propaganda. The Accord had grown comfortable in its power. It had forgotten how to fear. When Oblivion's hand finally revealed itself, there was no mistaking it. It emerged from a dead star system, sliding into view like a ghost. Its surface was dark as night, swallowing all light, outlined only by the fiery glow of distant stars. Unlike the polished vessels of the Accord, Oblivion's hand bore no symbols, no marks of allegiance. It was a weapon shaped like a ship, built for one purpose: vengeance. The first target was a listening outpost on the fringe world of Kaler's Spine. Manned by only a handful of officers, it barely had time to record the ship's silhouette before being erased in a single blast of searing energy. The Accord's commanders, arrogant and slow to believe the danger, sent a token fleet to intercept. They vanished without so much as a final broadcast. Inside the command chambers of the Accord's High Senate, panic began to seep into once confident voices. Who could build such a thing? Who would dare challenge the Galactic Order? The answer came when the survivors of a battered trade convoy limped into safe space. Their damaged ship carried fragments of blackened hull, twisted beyond recognition, but underneath the burns, human designs were unmistakable. Designs thought lost to history, designs that matched ancient schematics locked away in forbidden archives. It was humanity. There was no doubt anymore. They had returned. Not as diplomats, not as explorers, but as executioners. As Oblivion's hand accelerated toward Venora Prime, the Accord scrambled fleets and activated planetary shields. The senators argued, pointing fingers at each other, demanding answers. Fear turned to dread when the first deep space satellites captured the ship's approach. Its engines were unlike anything seen before. Its weapons remained hidden, yet the growing gravity wake it produced suggested energy levels beyond comprehension. Across the stars, a single truth took hold. The nightmare had never ended. It had only been waiting. And now, humanity had come back to finish what it started. Venora Prime stood as the jewel of the Accord, a symbol of peace, prosperity, and civilization. Its golden spires touched the clouds, its rivers shimmered with engineered purity, and its people believed themselves untouchable. No war had touched Venora Prime in 5 centuries. The planetary shields had never once been activated in earnest. The world trusted in the Accord's promises of eternal security. That trust was shattered when Oblivion's hand arrived. It appeared in orbit without warning, a black scar against the endless blue of Venora's skies. The orbital defense stations, sleek and proud, immediately locked onto the intruder. Automated weapon systems sprang to life. Thousands of missiles, plasma beams, and kinetic rounds hurled toward the massive ship. None of them landed. As if wrapped in an invisible shroud, Oblivion's hand moved through the storm untouched. Every projectile simply veered off course, swallowed by an unseen force, or deflected harmlessly into space. The defense commanders issued frantic orders. Fighter wings launched in desperate waves. Citizens gathered in the streets, gazing upward with a mixture of awe and fear. And then the sky opened. From the heart of Oblivion's hand, a single beam of crimson light lanced downward. It struck the central shield generator on the surface, bypassing defenses as if they did not exist. For a heartbeat, there was silence. Then the ground heaved upward, and the shield generators, the very heart of Venora Prime's protection, detonated in a blinding eruption of molten metal and shattered earth. Without the shields, the world was defenseless. In swift, surgical strikes, Oblivion's hand unleashed its wrath. Energy blasts rained down like a crimson storm, each strike erasing a sector, a city, a monument. The golden spires crumbled into dust. The great libraries, the academies, the art sanctuaries, all turned to ash in moments. The screams of billions rose into the air, lost beneath the roaring collapse of civilization. The Accord's fleet, finally arriving from neighboring systems, could only watch in horror. Their commanders hesitated. They had never planned for this. Their ships were designed for border skirmishes and ceremonial displays, not for facing a force born solely for annihilation. In the command center of Oblivion's hand, the human captain stood motionless, observing the devastation with cold, detached precision. His crew, once flesh and blood, now enhanced beyond recognition, carried out the assault with mechanical perfection. They offered no mercy. They answered no calls for surrender. When the destruction was complete and only smoking ruins remained where once a thriving world had stood, a signal was transmitted across every known frequency. It was short, brutal, final. Humanity remembers. Across the galaxy, that message echoed like a death knell. Every leader, every citizen, every soldier heard it and understood. The age of complacency was over. The age of fear had returned, and humanity was leading it. The fall of Venora Prime sent shockwaves across the galaxy. News traveled faster than any ship could, carried by terrified survivors, intercepted transmissions, and desperate pleas for help. Whole systems fell into chaos. Trade routes shut down. Border worlds armed themselves with anything they could find. Panic was no longer a distant possibility. It was now reality. In the marble halls of the Accord's High Senate, leaders argued furiously. They blamed one another. They doubted the reports. They questioned the very foundations of their long-held power. But no amount of words could rebuild Venora Prime. No speeches could deny the smoking crater it had become. The Accord's Grand Marshal, an aging strategist who had never seen real war, called for a united fleet to form. A colossal armada, bigger than anything assembled in living memory, was to be gathered from every member world. They believed numbers would protect them. They believed overwhelming force could stop the coming storm. They did not understand what they faced. While the Accord scrambled, Oblivion's hand moved again. It did not linger over its victims. It struck like a phantom, appearing at new coordinates with terrifying precision. Outer colonies vanished from star maps overnight. Mining stations, agricultural hubs, even minor military outposts, all burned under its relentless assault. The tactics were unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. No demands, no negotiations, no warnings. Humanity did not want territory. They did not seek slaves. They had no interest in ruling. They wanted one thing: to erase. On Chorus Station, a fortified military stronghold believed to be impenetrable. The story was the same. The defenders prepared with confidence, armed with the latest technology and reinforced bunkers. Yet when Oblivion's hand appeared, the defenders realized their weapons were toys against an enemy that had long since surpassed them. In less than an hour, Chorus Station was nothing more than twisted wreckage orbiting a dead world. Witnesses described the human warship moving with eerie calm, as if it was not even trying. Like a force of nature, inevitable and unstoppable. The ship's black hull reflected no light. Its weapons were invisible until the moment of impact, and its engines produced no sound, only a growing sense of dread as it drew near. The Accord scientists, desperate to understand, analyzed the few fragments retrieved from the wreckage. They found materials that defied known science, weapons that operated beyond current understanding, and a brutal efficiency that spoke of centuries of secret evolution. The greatest minds of the galaxy came to a single conclusion. Humanity had not just survived in the shadows. They had advanced far beyond anything the galaxy had ever seen. And they had come back, not as equals, but as executioners delivering judgment. World by world, system by system, the name Oblivion's Hand became a curse whispered in terror. Families flood deeper into the galactic core. Armies prepared for battles they already knew they could not win. In the heart of every star system, a terrible truth began to take hold. There would be no mercy. There would be no escape. Humanity was rewriting the future, in fire and ash. The Accord had finally done what it had promised. It assembled the mightiest fleet that the galaxy had ever seen. Over 1,000 warships, including heavy dreadnoughts, battle cruisers, and advanced stealth destroyers, were gathered at Drexcian's Gate, a narrow passage that led into the heart of the core worlds. It was a place of strategic significance, the perfect spot to stop the encroaching terror. Or so they thought. The leaders of the Accord sat behind their war tables, confident that this was the moment they would make a stand. They would destroy Oblivion's Hand before it could do any more damage. With their combined fleets, they were certain they could break through the warship's defenses, even if they couldn't fully understand them. The human ship had taken down planetary shields, torn apart stations, and eradicated colonies, but this time, there would be no surprise. The first signals of Oblivion's Hand arrived not as an invasion, but as a whisper in the dark. The sensors on the fleet picked up its presence only when it was nearly upon them. A shadow, too fast to catch, too precise to avoid. The enemy had learned the art of disappearing into the fabric of space itself, and it seemed Oblivion's Hand could slip in and out of any engagement with terrifying ease. The Accord's fleet fired first. Waves of missiles screamed through space. Energy beams carved the void with blinding brightness. The massive dreadnoughts unleashed full broadsides, attempting to batter down what they hoped were weak spots in the hull. The surrounding space lit up with the chaos of 1,000 weapons firing. But nothing landed. Oblivion's Hand simply moved through the storm as if it were nothing more than mist. Its speed was unimaginable, its evasions flawless. The dreadnought shots bypassed it like arrows missing their target, spinning into the emptiness. Then, without warning, Oblivion's Hand struck back. From the belly of the ship, a barrage of energy pulses tore through the fleet. They weren't wide beams or massive blasts. They were precise, pinprick strikes that cut through hulls and severed command chains. A single blast would destroy the targeting systems of an entire cruiser. Another would tear through the engines of a destroyer, sending it spiraling into space. In mere moments, the first line of defense was in shambles. Fleets attempted to regroup, but Oblivion's Hand was already gone. It appeared again at the other end of the formation, picking off another ship with clinical precision. There were no dramatic explosions. There were no heroic last stands. Just cold efficiency. In less than 2 hours, the galaxy's greatest armada was reduced to a floating graveyard. The few surviving ships fled, damaged and broken, not knowing where Oblivion's Hand had gone, not knowing if they had truly survived at all. Back in the command center of the fleet, generals and admirals sat in stunned silence. They had all believed they were facing an enemy they could defeat, a rogue faction with forgotten technology. But now, they knew the truth. They had fought not a band of rebels, not an ancient race of warlords. They had fought humanity, and humanity had already won. The galaxy reeled in the wake of the destruction. Entire worlds, once bastions of power and culture, were now little more than memories. The survivors, now scattered across the core worlds, could not escape the truth that had become undeniable. Humanity had not just returned. It had transcended everything the galaxy thought it understood about war, technology, and power. Across research labs and military academies, the galaxy's brightest minds pored over the remnants of Oblivion's Hand, trying to comprehend its mysteries. What they discovered was more horrifying than any weapon. The warship was not a machine, nor was it purely human. It was a perfect amalgamation of both, a creation beyond anything seen before. Humanity had merged with technology, evolving in ways the galaxy could never have predicted. The remnants of the human crew found aboard the wreckage were unlike any other soldiers. They were no longer flesh and blood in the traditional sense. Their bodies had been augmented with advanced cybernetics, their minds enhanced with neural interfaces that allowed them to control Oblivion's hand as if it were an extension of their own will. Their technology was so far ahead that it defied the comprehension of the galaxy's most advanced engineers. Weapons that could annihilate entire fleets were housed within them. And yet, they were but a small part of the vast machine that humanity had become. The humans aboard Oblivion's hand had not simply survived their exile from the galaxy. They had evolved into something far more formidable, creating a perfect union between their flesh, mind, and the technology they wielded. They were not conquerors in the traditional sense. No, they had become something far more terrifying. Executioners. Cold, calculating, and relentless, they had perfected the art of annihilation. In hidden underground labs across the galaxy, the Accord's military leaders frantically tried to reverse engineer the technology they had recovered. They could not fathom the idea that humanity had once been their equal. Now they were something else entirely, something beyond their reach. And they were angry. As the Accord scrambled, a select few began to speak of an ancient prophecy, one buried in forgotten archives. It spoke of humanity's return, but not as a simple remnant of a lost age. It warned that humanity would return, but as something far greater, an unstoppable force that would either enslave or destroy everything in its path. The more the Accord learned, the more they understood that they had underestimated humanity in the worst possible way. Humanity had not just adapted to the harsh conditions of exile. It had forged a new path, a path that made it more powerful than any of the galaxy's civilizations. The captain of Oblivion's hand had known this from the start. The galaxy, so comfortable in its ignorance, had not understood the depths of humanity's wrath. They had not known how far humanity would go to make them remember. And now, the galaxy would have no choice but to remember. One by one, the great worlds of the Accord fell. Some fought back, launching their fleets into battle, only to be shattered in minutes. Others tried to negotiate, sending desperate emissaries with promises of peace, only to watch their envoys vanish into the void, never to return. The message was clear: humanity would offer no quarter. The galaxy's great powers, once so proud and confident, began to crumble under the weight of their own hubris. The shining cities of Korath's Reach, once a symbol of hope, were reduced to smoking ruins. The wealth and knowledge of the Rylan Consortium returned to dust. The thriving agricultural world of Toria, known for its fertile plains and abundant crops, was erased as if it had never existed. Humanity was not just destroying worlds, it was erasing their very legacies. The galactic leaders, broken by the rapid loss of their power and influence, had no answers. They threw everything they had at Oblivion's hand, but it was as if their weapons were nothing more than paper cutouts against a storm. The warship's shields absorbed every strike, and its weapons returned each blow with devastating precision. The galaxy's greatest fleets had been reduced to nothing. 1,000 ships had fallen at Drexion's gate. Hundreds of worlds had been turned to ash, and still, Oblivion's hand moved forward, unstoppable. On the streets of what remained of the Accord cities, whispers of rebellion began to stir. Some had begun to question the wisdom of their leaders, who had believed they were untouchable. Some began to see humanity's wrath, not as a random act, but as the final judgment upon a galaxy that had grown complacent, that had forgotten its own history. The old empires, the old alliances, all had been built on the oppression of the forgotten and the weak. Now, humanity had come to reclaim what had been lost, to remind the galaxy that no empire, no matter how strong, could last forever. The human ships that followed Oblivion's hand were more than war machines. They were harbingers of the new era. They moved with cold precision, their crews steeled in the knowledge that this was not a war they could lose. Each strike, each planet burned, was a reminder of what had been lost and what was to come. The final bastions of resistance began to collapse. The remnants of the Galactic fleet scattered, unable to organize, unable to stand against the relentless tide of humanity's fury. Governments fell, alliances shattered, and the once proud worlds of the Accord were left smoldering in the aftermath of their arrogance. One by one, the stars that had once been symbols of hope and progress were reduced to darkened graves. The people of the galaxy could only watch as the flames of their civilizations flickered out. And in the heart of every crumbling world, humanity's cold message echoed again. We remember. The galaxy, once teeming with life and civilizations, now lay in ruins. The proud empires of the Accord, the great merchants of the Igona Trade Federation, the scholars of the HFY Collective, all were but dust and echoes. In the wake of humanity's return, there was nothing left to fight for but survival. The survivors, scattered and broken, had retreated to the deepest corners of the galaxy. The core worlds, long believed to be impenetrable, had fallen silent. No more grand proclamations, no more confident speeches. The leaders of the Accord had no answers, no plans. They only had fear. The final bastion of the Accord was the star system known as the Citadel, a place of such impenetrable security that it had been deemed the last refuge for all who remained loyal to the old order. It was a heavily fortified system, surrounded by the mightiest defenses ever constructed, and its citizens believed it to be beyond the reach of even Oblivion's hand. But humanity had already proven that no defense, no matter how formidable, could withstand their wrath. When Oblivion's hand appeared in the system, it was not with the force of a military assault, but with the quiet, inevitable certainty of a predator. The fleet that had once been stationed there, the last great armada of the Accord, was now a mere shadow of its former self. Most of its ships had already been lost, and the few that remained were barely operational. The citizens of the Citadel watched in terror as the massive human warship glided into their space, its silhouette dark and foreboding against the backdrop of the system's burning suns. It was impossible to look away, as if its very presence commanded attention. No ship had ever moved with such intent, such purpose. Inside the heart of the Citadel, the remaining council members prepared for the inevitable. They had called for a final stand, hoping against hope that somehow they could stop the tide of destruction that had swept across the stars. But even they knew it was hopeless. There were no reinforcements coming. There were no more fleets to rally. The last fleet had been lost at Drexcian's gate. The human captain aboard Oblivion's hand had watched the destruction from the depths of the ship's bridge. His expression remained impassive, his crew moving with the precision of machines. It wasn't anger or hatred that drove him. It was something more. A deep, unwavering certainty that this was the way things were meant to be. The galaxy had grown too comfortable, too complacent. It had forgotten the lessons of the past. Humanity had returned to remind it of its place in the universe. With a single command, the captain set the course for the Citadel. The remaining fleet launched a final, desperate counterattack, but it was too little, too late. Every weapon they fired passed through the black void, lost and pointless against the impenetrable might of humanity's warship. Oblivion's hand struck once more, and the Citadel, the last symbol of the Accord's defiance, began to crumble under the sheer force of the human assault. This time, there would be no survivors. The Citadel burned. Its vast fleets, its colossal defenses, and its proud citizens had been swept away in an instant. The last of the great powers had fallen, and with it, the illusion of the galaxy's invincibility. There was nothing left but silence, the kind that settled in deep space after a storm had passed, leaving only wreckage in its wake. The message humanity had sent was clear. No empire, no matter how great, could endure forever. The mighty had been reduced to nothing, not by the weapons of another, but by the relentless, unforgiving will of a species that had been forgotten, exiled, and now returned. Oblivion's hand stood alone in the ruins of the Citadel, its black hull reflecting the dying light of the system's fading stars. There were no celebrations, no fanfares, no shouts of victory. The war was over, but it had never been about victory. It had been about something far greater. Humanity had returned, not for revenge, but for something that could never be given: acknowledgement. The survivors of the galaxy's greatest civilizations had nothing left to say. Their leaders, their generals, their brightest minds had all fallen, broken by the unstoppable force that had come from a past they had long since ignored. They had never thought humanity would rise again. They had never imagined that the very species they had exiled would return as the reckoning. Across the remaining habitable planets, the few survivors, those who had hidden, who had escaped to the outermost reaches of the galaxy, began to piece together their broken lives. But even they knew that the world they once knew was gone. They would never return to the glory of the past. The age of the Accord, the age of peaceful empires and confident alliances, was finished. Humanity, in its perfect form, had rebuilt itself, not just as a species, but as a force of nature. It had become something so far beyond the rest of the galaxy that the two could never again be considered equals. Humanity was now a living embodiment of judgment. Its warships, its technology, its will, all stood as a reminder that no one, no matter how powerful, could escape the inevitable reckoning. The human captain aboard Oblivion's Hand issued his final command. The ship began to move away from the burning remnants of the Citadel. There was no fanfare, no declaration. It simply moved on, leaving the galaxy to rebuild, to remember, to live with the consequences of its past decisions. In the end, humanity's message had been clear. It had not come to conquer. It had come to remind. And now, it was gone, leaving only the stars and silence in its wake. The galaxy would remember. And in that memory, it would find its future. Around 500 words,